It had been raining ash. Not the gentle drift of forge fallout, but choking sheets of it, thick enough to turn day into rust-coloured twilight. The void station Helia's claim hung crippled above the mining world of Gathor, its rotation faltering, its hull punctured in a dozen places. Boarding torpedoes had already struck. Inside the station's primary trade concourse, rogue trader Sebastian Vale was having what he would later describe as a moderately inconvenient afternoon. The dark Eldar had come without warning. They moved like shards of broken night, blades curved and elegant, armor lacquered in cruel hues. Traders and dock workers died screaming as splinter fire scythed through the crowd. Sebastian ducked behind a cargo crate stamped with the sigil of some long-defunct agri-guild and swore fluently. Blood oozed from the wound in his side. "This," he muttered, adjusting the calibration ring on his newly installed retinal augmetic, "is catastrophically bad timing." A barbed net snapped through the air where he had been standing moments before. He bolted, short legs pumping, coat flaring behind him. He sprinted through the concourse while clutching his hand to his last rib. The bag containing a data slate full of shipping contracts and a stasis case containing 3 extremely illegal Voidlink's pelts slapping at his other hip. A dark Eldar warrior dropped from an overhead gantry, blade poised. Sebastian drew and fired his compact plasma pistol wildly. The shot went wide, searing a decorative arch instead of the attacker. "Regrettable," he shouted. The blade descended, and was intercepted mid-strike by a roaring chains ward. The impact threw sparks across the chamber. A giant in grey ceramite slammed into the dark Eldar with the force of an orbital drop. The Xenos twisted impossibly fast, but not fast enough. The chains ward bit deep, tearing through alien armor and flesh in a spray of blackened ichor as the Xeno screamed and died. The Astartes did not pause. He advanced through the concourse like a storm given shape, bolt pistol barking, blade rising and falling, each step deliberate, each kill absolute. Sebastian stared up at him. The warrior's helm turned slightly, amber lenses fixed on him. "You are not armed sufficiently," the Space Marine said. Sebastian blinked. "I find that to be an unnecessarily accurate observation." Another dark Eldar vaulted toward them. The Space Marine shot it from the air without looking. "Remain behind me," the warrior commanded. Sebastian hesitated only a fraction of a second before obeying. They fought their way to docking Spire 12. The dark Eldar had taken captives, dozens of them bound in crackling energy snares near a waiting raider craft. The Xenos leader, tall and draped in flensed skin trophies, turned as the Astartes approached. There was no exchange of words, only violence. The Archon moved like lightning, agonizer whip, lashing forward in arcs of violet pain. It wrapped around the Space Marine's arm, energy field shrieking as it bit into ceramite. Sebastian watched in horrified fascination as the whip constricted, its barbs digging deeper. The Astartes did not cry out. He stepped forward into the pain, closed the distance, and drove his chainsword through the Archon's chest. The whip slackened. The captives were freed. The raider detonated under precise bolt fire as it attempted to lift. When it was done, the concourse was a charnel house. Sebastian leaned against a bulkhead, breathing hard. "Well," he said, straightening his coat, "that was invigorating." The Space Marine removed his helm. His face was stern, scarred, and flecked with alien blood. "Name?" he demanded. Sebastian Vale, rogue trader, entrepreneur, occasional visionary. A pause. You trade in Void Link's pelts, the Space Marine said flatly. Sebastian blinked. You've heard of my work. I have seen your cargo manifests. There was no approval in the statement. You are wounded. Sebastian considered the towering warrior. I've had worse, he shrugged. And you are? Captain Darius Blacklock, Stone Dog's chapter. Sebastian glanced at the severed Archon, then at the destroyed raider. Well, Captain Blacklock, he said carefully, it occurs to me that this station is no longer structurally sound. As if summoned by the remark, the deck shuddered violently. Warning klaxons began to howl. Blacklock looked toward the viewport, where distant fires burned across the station's hull. It will not hold orbit. Sebastian cleared his throat. I happen to have a moderately functional void ship docked 3 spires over. Blacklock regarded him for a long moment. You will evacuate the civilians? Sebastian sighed. Yes, of course. Civilians. Naturally. 3 hours later, the last shuttle detached from the failing station. From the bridge of the Fortune's Teeth, Sebastian watched Helios Claim break apart in a silent cascade of debris. Blacklock stood beside him, arms folded. You risked much for trade goods, the Astartes observed. Sebastian gave a thin smile whilst tending his wound. I risked much because I was already there. He glanced sideways. You risk much because you chose to be. Blacklock said nothing. After a moment, Sebastian extended his bloodied hand. For what it's worth, Captain, if you ever find yourself in need of transport, intelligence, or moderately overpriced supplies, I am at your disposal. The Space Marine looked at the offered hand as though it were a curious weapon. Then, slowly, he clasped it. Do not make me regret this. Sebastian's grin widened. Oh, I fully intend to, he said. And somewhere between Ashfall and Voidfire, amid collapsing metal and Xenos blood, an unlikely alliance had been forged. The war room had emptied hours ago. Strategic hololiths dimmed one by one, leaving only the low hum of distant generators and the ever-present tremor of Gorgon beneath stone and steel. Beyond the armoured viewport of his quarters, aboard Galsai's Fury, Furnace Point churned in slow, malignant spirals, green and violet eddies folding over one another like a wound refusing to close. Darius Blacklock stood alone. His quarters were austere, as all Astartes' chambers were. A slab altar bearing the sigil of the Stone Dogs, a weapons rack mounted with ritual precision, a single iron-bound chest containing relics older than most Imperial worlds. He had removed his helm. The scar across his brow seemed deeper in the low light. On the central table lay 2 objects, Indomitus and the Lash of Redemption. The chain fist's adamantine teeth were freshly rehoned. Scoring along the housing told the tale of Gorgon's surface battle. Hairline fractures, where Gauss fire had kissed the casing. The machine's spirit within it growled faintly through its dormant power core, restless even in silence. Beside it lay the lash, coiled in dark loops. The barbs were dulled from the gateway's destruction. Its power field emitters needed recalibration. It smelled faintly of ozone and old blood. Blacklock rested a gauntleted hand on the chain fist. 6,000 years of lineage sat in that weapon. It had been borne by 3 chapter masters before him. It had cut through heretic dreadnoughts, tyrannid biotitans, orc gargants, and now Necron gods. He closed his eyes. For a moment he was no longer chapter master. He was captain. ash falling from the sky, a wiry human swearing creatively behind him, while clutching illegal pelts, a whip cracking against ceramite. He could still feel the sting of that first lash, the humiliation of pain inflicted by something so crude. He remembered stepping into it, choosing the wound, breaking the wielder. He opened his eyes. The lash of redemption had been a symbol at first, a lesson made metal. Now it was something else, a reminder that the Imperium endured not by purity alone, but by will. A chime sounded softly at the chamber door. "Enter," Blacklock said. The door parted with a hydraulic sigh. Sebastian Vale stepped inside without waiting for further invitation. He had removed his flamboyant outer coat. Beneath it, his attire was more practical. Void-hardened fabric, reinforced with discreet armor plates. The thin mechadendrite at his collar flexed idly as his artificial eye adjusted to the chamber's lighting. "I was told you were brooding," Sebastian said lightly. "I do not brood," Blacklock replied. Sebastian's gaze drifted to the table. "Ah, you're communing with the cutlery." He stepped closer, examining Indomitus with open fascination. "I never get tired of that thing. It's profoundly unsubtle. It is effective." "Yes, but so is orbital bombardment," Sebastian countered. "There's artistry in restraint." Blacklock said nothing. Sebastian's expression softened slightly as he looked at the lash. "You still carry it?" "Yes." "Sentimental?" "No." Sebastian tilted his head. "You keep relics of enemies close, Darius. That says something. It says that enemies teach." A silence settled between them. Beyond the viewport, Furnace Point flared brighter for a heartbeat, casting warped shadows across the chamber walls. Sebastian followed Blacklock's gaze. "It's changing," the rogue trader said quietly. "The storm. Yes. My augurs are picking up harmonics between the warp flux and Gorgon's deeper strata. Not natural resonance, directed." Blacklock turned back to the weapons. "They are attempting something larger." "Of course they are," Sebastian replied. "You shattered their avatar. You embarrassed a dynasty." Blacklock's expression did not change. "I do not fight for pride." "No," Sebastian said softly. "You fight because you must." He folded his hands behind his back. "There are rumors in the outer systems, a name surfacing in fragmented data echoes, something older than the sepulchral mind." Blacklock waited. Sebastian hesitated, a rare crack in his usual levity. An entity referred to in fragmented Necron inscriptions as the Architect of Silence. The chamber seemed colder. Blacklock's bionic eye glowed faintly brighter. A commander? Possibly. Possibly something else. The references are inconsistent. Some suggest a cryptek of extraordinary antiquity. Others imply something closer to a shard. Blacklock's jaw tightened. "A god fragment." Sebastian gave a thin smile. "I dislike those." "As do I." They stood in silence for several heartbeats. Finally, Sebastian spoke again. "You ever regret it?" Blacklock did not look at him. "Regret what?" "The isolation, refusing recall to the wider crusades, binding the stone dogs to this sector." Blacklock turned slowly. "Coralize was abandoned. We were not." "That wasn't my question." Blacklock regarded him with the weight of centuries. "I regret every brother whose name I have etched into stone." Sebastian did not look away. "But not the choice?" "No." The rogue trader exhaled softly. "Good." He gestured toward the weapons. "Because whatever this architect is, it's not probing randomly. It's studying you." Blacklock's hand closed around the hilt of the lash. "Then it will learn." A low tremor rolled through the hull of Galsai's Fury, stronger than the previous ones. Warning sigils flickered briefly along the chamber wall. Sebastian's augmetic eye whirred. "That," he said carefully, "is new." A vox tone cut through the chamber. "Chapter Master," Virek 12's voice rasped urgently. "Subterranean surge detected. Energy readings surpass prior maxima. The deepest vaults are opening." Blacklock lifted Indomitus from the table. The chainfist's motor responded with a low, eager growl. He coiled the lash at his hip. "Location? Directly beneath the primary tomb nexus, a structure previously masked by phase distortion fields." Sebastian stepped back toward the doorway. "I assume this is the part where you stride toward unspeakable danger." "Yes." Sebastian offered a small, crooked smile. "Try not to get killed. It would complicate my investments." Blacklock paused at the threshold. "If I fall," he said evenly, "you will evacuate Carnassus's civilians." Sebastian's expression flickered, just briefly. "Yes." Blacklock inclined his head once. Then he strode from the chamber, armor heavy with purpose, relics of iron and memory at his side. Behind him, Sebastian remained for a moment longer, staring at the empty space where the chapter master had stood. Furnace Point flared again outside the viewport, and deep beneath Gorgon's crust, something vast shifted for the first time in 10 million years. The architect of silence was waking. The descent began in silence. No thunderous declarations, no vox broadcast oaths, only the measured tread of ceramite boots descending into the black. The breach point lay within the shattered pyramid, where the sepulchral mind's avatar had once risen. Now the ruins had parted further, stone folding away in precise geometric layers to reveal a spiraling shaft of impossible depth. No dust fell, no debris shifted. The opening was too clean. Blacklock stood at its edge, helm sealed once more. Tactical overlays scrolled across his vision, mapping the first 100 meters before dissolving into static interference. Behind him assembled the strike force, Joroon and the remaining Terminators of the 1st Company, 2 squads of 9th Company Primaris. Virek, 12 suspended by gravitic harness, mechadendrites flexing as he streamed data from every active sensor. Above them, Thunderhawks maintained combat air patrol. Orbital guns stood ready, but Blacklock knew, if what stirred below fully woke, orbit would not matter. He keyed the command channel. Stone dogs. Helm lenses flared red in the darkness. "We descend." The shaft walls were not carved. They were grown. Layered necrodermis flowed like frozen liquid, etched with glyphs that pulsed faintly as the Astartes advanced downward, via mag clamps and gravitic lines. The deeper they moved, the quieter the world became. No tremors, no distant weapons fire. Even the hum of armor systems seemed muted. Virek 12's voice came thin through interference. Electromagnetic spectrum suppression increasing. Sound propagation dampened artificially. "We are entering a controlled silence field." "The architect," Joroon muttered. At 2 kilometers below the surface, the shaft opened into a cavern vast enough to swallow a hive city. Blacklock stepped from the spiral onto a platform overlooking the abyss. He did not speak. He simply observed. The cavern was not empty. It was ordered. Rows upon rows of monolithic structures stretched into darkness, each aligned with mathematical precision. Suspended between them were geometric frames containing dormant constructs, thousands of them. War forms larger than any previously encountered. Above it all, at the center of the cavern, floated a structure unlike the others. A sphere of black metal, kilometers wide. No green glow, no visible power source. It simply hung there, watching. Energy readings? Blacklock asked. Virek 12's reply trembled at the edges. Minimal, dormant state, but the material composition. Chapter Master, this is not standard necrodermis. It matches no dynastic pattern in Mechanicus archives. The sphere rotated slowly, and then a line appeared across its surface, a seam. Light bled from within, not green, white, cold, and absolute. The light did not flare outward. It condensed. A narrow beam descended from the sphere to the cavern floor. Where it touched, reality bent. From that distortion emerged a shape, tall, slender, crowned in layered spines of living metal. Its body was not ornate like a lord's, nor massive like the avatar Blacklock had destroyed. It was refined, its face smooth and featureless, save for 2 vertical slits of white radiance. Energy spike detected, Virek 12 whispered. Quantum coherence beyond prior parameters. The figure did not move, yet Blacklock felt it, a pressure in his skull, not psychic, not warp-born, something colder, a presence examining him, a voice formed, not in sound, but in comprehension. You fracture design. Blacklock stepped forward, Indomitus lowering into ready stance. I am Darius Blacklock, he said aloud, chapter master of the Stone Dogs. The figure tilted its head a fraction. Irrelevant designation. Behind him, the Stone Dogs formed a defensive perimeter. Bolters raised, storm shields locked. The white light within the figure intensified. This sector is scheduled for reclamation. Your persistence introduces inefficiency. Blacklock's grip tightened. We endure. A pause. Then, endurance is not permanence. The cavern shifted. From the monolithic rows, constructs began to activate. Not warriors. Something else. Sleek, multi-limbed forms unfurling with silent precision. Virek 12's mechadendrites spasmed. Designation. Unknown. Possibly pre-dynastic warforms. We must withdraw. No, Blacklock said. He took another step forward. You're the architect of silence. The figure regarded him. Designation approximates translation. You orchestrate this awakening. Correction. I restore equilibrium. The cavern lights dimmed further. Sound dampened almost entirely. Even the hum of power armor faded into near nothing. Silence became oppressive. The architect raised one elongated hand. The Stone Dog's Auspex feeds died. Vox links crackled and cut. Only local suit communication remained. Jorun's voice came through, tight and controlled. Orders. Blacklock felt the weight of the moment. If this being completed whatever design it had begun, Gorgon would not merely awaken. It would transform. The entire Correlate string could fall under mechanical dominion. Blacklock activated the lash of redemption. Its barbs crackled, the power field flaring in defiance of the suppression field. The architect's head tilted slightly. Primitive adaptive weapon. Inefficient. Blacklock answered by charging. The first warforms descended from the monolith rows, gliding across the cavern floor without sound. They struck like surgical instruments, limbs elongated into blades of coherent energy. One sliced clean through a Primaris Marine before the squad could react. Bolters roared in reply, explosive rounds detonating across metallic frames. The architect did not retreat. It observed. Blacklock closed the distance in long, thunderous strides. A white beam lanced from the architect's hand. He pivoted, the beam grazing his pauldron and shearing through a terminator behind him. The warrior fell without a sound. Blacklock hurled the lash. The barbed tip wrapped around the architect's forearm. Energy fields clashed, white against crackling blue. For a heartbeat, the cavern brightened. Blacklock pulled. The architect did not move. Strength acknowledged, Blacklock ignited Indomitus. The chain fist roared with feral hunger, its teeth spinning at maximum torque. He charged through the suppressive field and drove the weapon toward the architect's torso. The figure shifted, not quickly, but precisely. The chain fist grazed its side. Sparks of white light erupted. For the first time, the architect reacted. Its other hand struck Blacklock in the chest. The impact was silent, but catastrophic. He felt ribs fracture. Internal alarm screamed. He was hurled backward across the cavern floor, skidding through dust that had not been disturbed in 10 million years. The war forms pressed harder now. Stone dogs fell in disciplined retreat, forming concentric defensive rings. "Chapter Master!" Jorunen's voice cut through the suit link. Blacklock forced himself upright. Blood filled his mouth. He wiped it away. The architect regarded him. "You resist termination beyond statistical expectation." Blacklock laughed, a harsh, broken sound within his helm. "We are the stone dogs." He rose fully. "And we bite." He triggered the emergency signal. Above, kilometers overhead, Galsai's Fury received it. Virek 12's orbital subroutines executed instantly. Macro batteries rotated. Deep-buried cyclonic charges placed hours earlier as contingency, armed within the cavern's upper strata. The architect's white gaze shifted upward. Escalation detected. Blacklock sprinted forward again. "Jorun!" he roared. "Now!" The cavern ceiling detonated. Not a single blast, but a cascading chain of subterranean ruptures. Stone and metal collapsed inward as orbital lance strikes punched through Gorgon's crust in converging beams of annihilation. The cavern shook violently. Monolith rose, toppled. Warforms shattered. The architect raised both hands, a white field expanding around it as debris cascaded. Blacklock leapt through falling stone. Indomitus screamed. He drove the chain fist directly into the expanding white field. For a moment the universe narrowed to grinding teeth and blinding light. The field cracked. A fracture appeared across the architect's torso. White radiance bled out in jagged lines. The cavern imploded. Jorun seized Blacklock as the teleport recall engaged at maximum distortion tolerance. The world became light. They rematerialized aboard Galsai's Fury in a cascade of sparks and ruptured air. Half the strike force was missing. Blacklock collapsed to one knee, armor scorched and fractured. Virek 12's optics burned bright. Subterranean collapse successful. Seismic readings indicate massive structural destabilization of lower vaults. "And the architect?" Jorune demanded. Silence stretched. Deep scans probed through molten strata and collapsing chambers. Finally, "Energy signature diminished," Virek said slowly. "Not destroyed." Blacklock forced himself to stand. "Dormant. Fragmented." Blacklock looked toward the viewport. Gorgon's surface now bore a fresh scar, kilometers wide, glowing faintly where orbital lances had struck. Furnace Point churned still, but its resonance had shifted. The architect had been wounded, not ended. Blacklock removed his helm. His face was pale but resolute. "It learns," he said quietly. Behind him, Sebastian Vale watched the scarred planet through reinforced glass, his artificial eye tracking residual energy patterns. "Then," the rogue trader murmured, "let us hope it learns caution." Deep beneath the fractured crust of Gorgon, Within chambers shielded from collapse, fragments of white light coalesced. Reassembling, recalculating, the equation had changed. The stone dogs were no longer an inefficiency. They were a variable, and the architect of silence did not tolerate unresolved variables. The furnace burned on,